In today's video, we look at a brutal double murder where the burnt remains of two men were exhumed by police in a buried van on a remote farm in Cornwall. The two victims were key enforcers for a trafficking network affiliated with a major Irish organised criminal group, responsible for collecting debts and overseeing operations. It would involve a smuggling ring and a cage fighter faced with a £40,000 debt who would resort to murder. We look into the events, the trial, and the aftermath. Thomas Haigh, 28 years old, gained recognition as a cage fighter, where he competed in various mixed martial arts events. Haigh's early career in combat sports showed promise. His dedication to training and fighting highlighted a focus on discipline and physical conditioning. Haigh's career in the MMA began with a series of successful bouts. However, despite his achievements, Haigh's career was marked by volatility. Injuries, financial strains, and personal challenges began to overshadow his athletic potential. The instability and financial pressures associated with being a professional fighter, the allure of quick money, and the potential for a more lucrative, though illegal, career path became increasingly appealing. Haigh's entry into trafficking was marked by a combination of financial desperation and opportunism. With his career in MMA faltering, Haigh turned to dealing as a means of financial survival. His initial involvement was as a smuggling mule, transporting product for large criminal networks. This role involved significant risk, but also promised substantial financial rewards. Haigh became entangled with a network of criminals affiliated with the IRA, involved in the international smuggling trade. His connections within this network facilitated by his involvement in the transportation, which required him to travel frequently and manage large sums of money. The pressure to perform and meet the demands of the criminal associates created a high-stress environment, worsening Haigh's financial and personal issues. The financial pressures of trafficking were compounded by significant debts. Haigh owed approximately £40,000 to the gang. Haigh's debt was he had failed to meet the repayment terms for product for his own associates. David Griffiths and Brett Flournoy, two enforcers who worked for the criminal organisation, had demanded that Haigh undertake a high-risk trip to Brazil for a second time to procure product. The situation escalated when David Griffiths and Brett Flournoy, frustrated with Haigh's inability to settle the debt, began threatening him. The nature of their threats was severe, reflecting the dangerous and high-stakes environment of the trade they were in. This pressure created a volatile atmosphere, leading Haigh to plan drastic measures to escape the situation he had landed himself in. The two enforcers pushing Haigh for his debt were David Griffiths, a 35-year-old father of three from Bracknell, Berkshire. Griffiths was a prominent enforcer in the trafficking network. He was known for his role in managing debts and ensuring compliance among lower-level operatives. Brett Flournoy was a 31-year-old boxer and a pub landlord from Bebington, Merseyside. Flournoy was also an enforcer in the criminal network. He had two children and was actively involved in the collection of debts and management of the network. Haigh had been sent by the enforcers to watch Ross Stone, a building contractor who was 28 years old. Stone had also run up debts between £20,000 and £30,000 to Griffiths and Flournoy. After product was stolen from him by an associate, he was under immense pressure to repay the money. Ross Stone faced constant death threats from the first day against him and his family, and even borrowed money from his mother and allowed the pair to turn his home, Sunny Corner Farm, into a processing plant, and to grow crops in lorry containers buried on the farm, supplying users in Cornwall. At one time, Griffiths and Flournoy arrived unannounced at the home of his partner's parents, hours after she'd given birth to their second child. all because he'd turned his phone off while she was in the labour ward. The two men then sent Haigh down to babysit Stone and several crops he was growing in a bid to give them their money back. Haigh agreed to the babysitting job. He was still being pressured into doing a run to Brazil and feared going abroad because a friend in South American prison had been caught on a recent trip. After a frosty first meeting, Haigh and Stone had got to know each other. They were very much alike. They realised they had a lot in common. They had the same look on life and both owed money, substantial money, to Griffiths and Flournoy. Ross Stone with Haigh at Sunny Corner Farm, a remote property situated near St Austell, Cornwall, was known for its isolation. The farm was utilised for criminal activities by the gang. The farm's seclusion made it an ideal location. Haigh told Ross Stone he can be rid of Griffiths and Flournoy. Haigh talked about a plan to Stone, and a few days later, Haigh would put his plan into action by arranging a meeting. On June 16, 2011, Haigh invited David Griffiths and Brett Flournoy to Sunny Corner Farm under the pretext of discussing the debt and the logistics of the Brazil trip. The remote location was chosen for the confrontation, away from prying eyes. Haigh a few months earlier had obtained illegally through his criminal connection a .45 caliber semi-automatic. Quite unusual in the criminal underworld. Most illegal weapons that get shipped into the country are from Europe and are 9mm ammo. The ammo for 9mm is more readily available and has less recoil. The .45 ACP has more stopping power than the 9mm because it's larger and slower, creating a larger wound channel and transferring more energy to the target. Its downside is the recoil, which makes it a harder weapon to control for those who are unfamiliar with it. Maybe because of the recoil and worried he might miss, Haigh found a shotgun at the farm and decided to use that instead. When Griffiths and Flournoy arrived at the farm, Haigh greeted the pair. The details of the exact nature of their discussion was not fully clear, but he was told that tensions were extremely high. When the initial meeting had calmed down, Haigh, armed with a shotgun, shot Griffiths and Flournoy. Haigh had shot each man twice. After the murders, Ross Stone played a crucial role in concealing the crime. Stone, alongside Haigh, burned the bodies of Griffiths and Flournoy in the van the enforcers arrived in, to destroy forensic evidence. The process of burning the bodies was to reduce the likelihood of identification and to remove physical evidence of the murders. Following the burning, the charred remains inside the burnt-out van, the Citroen Berlingo, was pushed by a digger into a pit, where the vehicle was then buried with the remains inside. It was reported in newspapers not long after of two missing persons, Mr Griffiths, originally from Plymouth but living in Berkshire, and Mr Flournoy from Merseyside, were last seen on Thursday, June the 16th. They were known to have arrived in Cornwall around 7:30 p.m. on that day. It is thought the two men were heading to Newquay or St Austell for a night out together, but it's not clear if they arrived. They have not been seen since, and they have made no contact with family or friends, which is completely out of character for both men. It is thought the missing men were travelling in a white Citroen Berlingo van, the registration A10 VVR, which had tile style written in brown on both sides. Mr Flournoy is known to have picked Mr Griffiths up in the vehicle from the car park on the Plymouth side of Tamar Bridge, which divides Devon and Cornwall, at around 7 p.m. on June the 16th. It is thought the men then travelled to East Cornwall. Police said Mr Griffiths had told his family they were going to Newquay and would be picking up a friend in St Austell on the way, but they had failed to book into their hotel as planned. Police have appealed for anyone who has seen the van to contact them. Mr Griffiths is described as 5'11" tall, of large build with shaved ginger hair. Mr Flournoy is 5'9" with a slim build, shaven head and stubble. He has 3 distinct tattoos: a yin and yang on his right arm, a Celtic design on his left arm, and an angel on his left leg. On July the 1st, 2 weeks after the murder, police made an unrelated raid on Sunny Corner Farm and arrested Stone for growing product in 2 shipping containers. He had equipped them with hydroponics and buried them underground to evade detection by police's infrared heat sensing cameras. Police had the diggers looking out for more containers. Ross Stone, in custody, realising they may find the van, then confessed to police in the interview that the missing 2 men reported in the paper were buried on the property, and he told police where to dig. He said he had returned to the farm to find 2 dead bodies on the ground. Haigh, he said, appeared topless and dishevelled. Haigh claimed the men arrived at the farm and he had been beaten up by Griffiths. He said Flournoy produced a gun and Haigh shot them. Stone said Haigh knew how to get rid of bodies properly and would not leave it to a thick farmer to tidy up. Just as Stone said, the remains of David Griffiths and Brett Flournoy in a burnt out Citroen van were recovered. The missing persons case became a murder inquiry. Police would put out a warrant for Haigh, but it would turn out he already had one on him. He was wanted for skipping court a few months before. He was in Brazil at the time, and he had a long sleeve arrest mainly for dealing in his teen years. The court date he missed was a charge of an airgun offence, but I could find no more details on that. Haigh was on the run for several weeks. His red BMW car was found full of his belongings, passport, driving licence and several £1,000s of cash in the boot. Police seized the car and waited to see if Haigh would come back, but he had already clocked the police by his car and fled. Haigh travelled to Yorkshire, out of money, his face plastered over news channels and newspapers. Exhausted and hungry, he handed himself in to police in Yorkshire. In court, the focus was on the criminal actions that took place at Stone's residence, Sunny Corner Farm. The legal proceedings against Haigh and Stone centred on their respective roles in the murders and the cover-up, with the ownership of the property serving as a backdrop to the crimes committed. The clarification of Sunny Corner Farm's ownership influenced the legal proceedings by establishing the true nature of Haigh and Stone's involvement. While Haigh was the primary perpetrator of the murders, Stone's ownership of the property and his actions to conceal the crime played a significant role in the case. During the court proceedings, Thomas Haigh was found guilty of the murders of David Griffiths and Brett Flournoy. The prosecution presented evidence of Haigh's financial obligations, the demands made by the victims, and the premeditated nature of the killings. The court heard about the brutal execution and the efforts to conceal the crime. Haigh was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. The severity of the sentence reflects the brutal nature of the crime and the calculated measures taken to cover it. The judge emphasised the impact of the murders on the victims' families and the broader community. Ross Stone was cleared of the actual murders, but was convicted for his role in the cover-up. He received a 5-year sentence. The court recognised Stone's confession as a critical element in solving the case, but also acknowledged the seriousness of his actions in aiding the concealment of the bodies. Despite their convictions, an inquest attempted to resolve unanswered questions about Griffiths and Flournoy and how they died, and exactly how their bodies were destroyed. Detective Constable Steve Hambley of Devon and Cornwall Police told the hearing the pair was shot in the back and the face. Detective Constable Hambley said, "I believe Brett Flournoy suffered one shot to his back, and this shot proved fatal. It may have taken place close to the farmhouse. I believe that David Griffiths suffered a fatal shot to his right shoulder and on the side of his face. There is no evidence that they survived past June the 16th, 2011, or that a third person was connected to the murders." This video has taken a few months to put together. The case, though, must be looked through the facts. 2 men were brutally murdered, and what we know is what happened on the farm is part of Rossi Stone's confession and parts of Haigh's story of events. How much pressure Griffiths and Flournoy put on Haigh and Stone is not and will ever be known. But the amount of people that came out, family and friends, people from the community saying the two murdered people, saying this is not them at all, and how they were portrayed in the media and in court, this case should always be viewed with an open mind. Haigh would appeal his conviction and fail, saying Stone shot and killed the two men. This I would say is very believable, as Stone would be more proficient with a shotgun compared to Haigh. We don't know, but okay, Stone confessed sealing Haigh's fate. A cage fighter ending two men is highly believable in the courts and in the public's mind. The sentence for Stone, 5 years, I had to check over, and it's correct. It's an extremely light sentence. His confession and portraying himself as thick and being led had worked. We'll never know the events, the true events that led up to the murders, but this is now in court records, which is now the events of what happened. The bodies may never have been found. Sunny Corner Farm, a name which doesn't fit the horror of what happened in the summer of 2011.